Good morning, Europe. Welcome to the program. Our top stories for you this hour. Italy threat. Days before a migration summit, another boat gets caught in the middle of a political storm. We're tracking this breaking story with Alex in the Cube, our social media news desk.
And we speak to the man running that rescue and ask what next for the hundreds of migrants they've saved.
Immigration confusion. Thousands of children separated from their families and detained in the U.S., and no one seems to know yet what will happen to them. Firing back, Europe slaps retaliatory tariffs on 2.8 billion euros worth of U.S. goods. And one big street party. Well, I got a taste of the fun at France's yearly Fete de la Musique. Thank you for starting your morning with us. We begin with breaking news, and Italy at the heart of fresh drama in the Mediterranean this morning, just days ahead of an EU mini-summit on migration. Weeks after blocking a rescue ship with more than 600 migrants, it's threatening to seize another boat carrying more than 200. Well, this is the boat in question, captured in these images last week in Malta, called Lifeline. It is a Dutch-flagged rescue ship. Italy is now threatening to detain it and transfer over 200 migrants on board to Italian Coast Guard ships. It comes amid confusion over the legal status of the ship. Well, Italy's Interior Minister Matteo Salvini is taking a hard line.
This ship is going to see Italy only by postcard, not because Matteo Salvini is ugly, bad and selfish, but because if there are rules, they have to respect them and not play with human lives.
Well, for the latest on the ship and Italy's response, Alex in the Cube is following this story. Alex.
We are, Tesa. Our team here in the Cube have been following the story as it's breaking this morning. We have Emmanuel, Rachel and Eric here across all the latest developments. And first of all, I just want to bring you an image of the ship. This is run by the German NGO mission Lifeline. It was rescuing people off the coast of Libya and obviously trying to save them from dangerous vessels. And despite being at the centre now of a growing international storm, overnight, the rescues didn't stop. They went to assist a container ship. You see, we can have a look at this here. This is images from overnight. They went to assist a container ship, helping rescue over 100 migrants and loading them on board this vessel. So very much helping other vessels help these desperate migrants in trying to make this dangerous crossing. Now, we've spoken to the co-founder of Mission Lifeline, and he has a very... Well, first of all, I mean, the latest we have from him is he's not heard anything from the Italian authorities. This is despite the threats from the transport minister to impound this vessel. Now, in a tweet, the Italian transport minister saying here that lives have to be saved legally and safely. And basically, in this tweet, he's criticising the actions of this vessel and these rescue workers for effectively endangering life and encouraging people to make this crossing. So earlier, when I spoke to the co-founder of Mission Lifeline, I started by asking him, now you're in this situation, what next?
Well, the next step is we try to talk to other European countries to get help, because the people on board need immediately evacuation. It couldn't be that they are on the sea for more than 50 or 80 hours. It's many people get seasick, so it's a situation. It's not easy, but we need to stay calm and wait what happened.
Just one last thing. A message we're getting from Italy is that ships like yourself are encouraging people to make this dangerous crossing. So the Italians are perhaps saying that by taking a stern stance on your particular ship, they are dissuading more people from making this dangerous journey. The idea is you're breaking the rules. What do you think of that?
First of all, we rescued in international waters, and if you ever have been there, it's a huge area, and it's just a matter of luck to find a boat. So these accusations are completely nonsense.
So this is an ongoing, developing, breaking story. We have ongoing communications with the team running that ship. We will have the latest for you throughout the morning. The next update from us here in the Cube in roughly 25 minutes, Tesa.
Thank you for keeping track of this story, Alex, and the Cube team. And as we mentioned, this comes just days before a summit in Brussels on the migrants crisis and weeks after Italy blocked the rescue ship Aquarius. Our correspondent Annelise Borges was the only broadcast journalist on board the Aquarius, and she's also following the latest on the summit. She's joining us live now from Paris. Annelise, the French president, he's come out quite strongly in this issue. Let me just say what he said about populism. He called it a bit like leprosy all across Europe. Those are his words. Italy reacted to that comment, didn't it?
Absolutely. Emmanuel Macron saying that populism is spreading across Europe like a disease. He actually also invited French citizens to fight against those who hate Europe. And because Rome is watching carefully everything that is being said here in Paris, they have felt that those remarks were actually an attack and called Emmanuel Macron a chatterbox and said that his stance on migration is actually hypocritical, Tesa.
And yeah, we talk about this draft agreement ahead of that mini summit. That has fallen apart as well. The talks are supposed to unite Europe, but it seems like it's causing even more division. What can we expect then?
Well, immigration certainly is a very divisive topic, and there seems to be a disconnect between those so-called arrival countries, those who have been feeling as though they have bear the brunt of all these crises, the refugee crisis, the migration crisis. I'm talking about those countries who have been the gateway to Europe. I'm talking about Greece, I'm talking about Spain, and of course I'm talking about Italy. They have been saying that they have received all these people and they have received no help from Brussels. So there seems to be this disconnect. There seems to be now a stance by Italy that is saying, look, enough is enough. We need help. And of course, Matteo Salvini, who is actually threatening to revisit even the collaboration, even the budgeting to the EU, even the contribution that Italy does to the EU. So this mini summit has been called in order to try and come up with a conclusion, with a unified response ahead of the summit next week, in order to try and avoid what we've seen again and again, where all these leaders come around the table and the only thing that they can agree on is to disagree on immigration.
Indeed, unity is elusive on this topic. Thank you for that. Annelise Borges live in Paris. Well, in the United States, confusion reigns over another immigration crisis. Thousands of children in detention centers after they were forcibly separated from their families. U.S. President Trump this week backed off his so-called zero-tolerance policy over illegal immigration. But the controversy continues. NBC News' correspondent Kristen Welker reports.
A soft touch with the First Lady on the ground.
I want to thank you for your hard work.
But a hard line on immigration from the president himself.
They're the worst immigration laws in the history of the world.
A day after the president retreated on the issue of separating families, there's still no public plan in place to reunite those roughly 2,300 children with their parents. DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen on Capitol Hill, unable to answer basic questions about their fate.
What happens to the kids now that have been separated from their parents? Why did you guys sign that order yesterday? So we're implementing it.
President Trump defended his zero-tolerance policy, which is still intact, requiring all adults who cross the border illegally to face prosecution.
If we took zero tolerance away, you would be overrun you'd have millions of people pouring through our border.
Extending an invitation to Democrats to come to the White House and work on an immigration deal while lashing out at the same time.
They don't care about the children. They don't care about the injury. They don't care about the problems. They don't care about anything.
And taking fresh aim at Mexico, blaming them for the influx of immigrants from Central America.
They walk through Mexico like it's walking through Central Park.
Tonight, there is new fallout. In an interview with the Christian Broadcast Network, Attorney General Jeff Sessions acknowledging the political damage.
It hasn't been good. And the American people don't like the idea that we're separating families.
On Capitol Hill, protesters wrapped in thermal blankets imitating the images from the border demanded action as a conservative immigration bill failed on the House floor.
The bill is not passed.
With another bill on life support postponed until tomorrow.
Kristen Welker reporting there. Now, the EU has just slapped revenge tariffs on iconic American products as a trade war heats up with U.S. President Trump. Well, the duties, which took effect at midnight, targets U.S. imports worth 2.8 billion euros. The products range from Harley-Davidson motorbikes to sweet corn and bourbon. The move has sent jitters through world stock markets, already worried by growing tensions over trade between the U.S. and China. And for more on this, let's head to Paris, where European affairs journalist Stéphane de Vries is standing by. Stéphane, the U.S. has picked fights over trade with its partners, the EU, Canada, Mexico and China. Well, will it be able to stand its ground?
Yes, absolutely. I think the European Union, by introducing these retaliatory measures today, shows that it can fight back. Of course, it's hitting at very important regions, important states for Donald Trump. They are hitting on bourbon, on Harley-Davidson, on cranberries, you would say. Wow, what does these products have to do with cars and steel? Well, actually, these are all products being produced in states like Wisconsin and Kentucky. So it's actually a pretty smart political move of the European Union. But of course, in general, a trade war is never good news, nor for the countries, nor for the world economy, and of course, not for the consumers. But the problem is, with the trade war, it's pretty childish, because in this case, the United States is imposing trade tariffs on steel and cars. The European Union says, okay, we're going to hit you with bourbon and Harley-Davidson. Tomorrow, the US will probably pick other products. So where is it going to stop? It's bad news for the world economy. But at this very moment, it seems like the European Union has the upper hand.
Yeah, but we know what's interesting is when these products were picked out by the EU, it was not just about trade, it was also symbolic. They picked out American products to send out a message. But how far can this trade war go?
Well, of course, the two economies are very dependent on each other. The US is the European Union's largest trade partner when it comes to external EU trade. You should not forget that the biggest part of the international trade is within the European Union. So even though it may affect the European Union's economy, the trade within the Union is much bigger than the trade with the US. Now, it also looks that Donald Trump is targeting Germany. He lashed out already this week about immigration to Angela Merkel. And of course, the tariffs are now, they're trying to punish the imports of machinery and vehicles to sectors dominated by Germany. The US has actually an enormous trade deficit with Germany, so it's basically aimed at Germany, because French car makers, for instance, they hardly export anything to the US. Now, Donald Trump can well be making a big mistake here, because ironically, the Germans also produce a lot of cars in the US. So when these German car makers are being hit, when they, for instance, will have to lay off people, then people in the United States will lose their jobs as well. So it's not a very smart move. On the other hand, it could also be a negotiation tactic by Donald Trump. Behind closed doors, the EU and the US are still talking about a trade agreement. And since Trump likes to be seen as a deal maker, he seems to run the country like he's running his businesses. This could be a negotiation tactic to put pressure on the European Union to negotiate a very interesting trade agreement for the US. So it may well be be in for a very short while. In a very short while, we could have a solution. But at this very moment, it looks like the US may have gone a little bit too far.
Right. Thank you for that analysis. Stéphane de Vries there, European Affairs journalist. And still to come for you on Good Morning Europe, as Italy threatens to seize the latest ship carrying hundreds of migrants in the Mediterranean, we check in with Aquarius. That's the rescue ship that last week sparked divisions in Europe. Plus, as Turkey gets ready to head to the polls this weekend, we talk about what's at stake in this election. That's after a short break. You're watching Good Morning Europe, our top story. Days before an EU mini-summit on immigration and less than a week since we saw over 600 migrants disembark from the Aquarius in Spain, another rescue ship is in hot water. After refusing it entry, Italy is now threatening to seize it and transfer the more than 200 migrants on board to Italian Coast Guard ships. Eurozone nations have agreed on the final elements of a plan to get Greece out of its 8-year bailout program and make its massive debt more manageable. Euronews journalist Luke Barber has more.
10 years ago, Greece's return from the depths of economic disaster seemed almost inconceivable. Now, however, following a meeting of Eurozone finance ministers to discuss the impending end of its bailout period, it would appear recovery is on the horizon. However, investors need to know it will not collapse under the weight of its debt.
With all these measures, we can safely say, based on the DSA of the institutions, that Greek debt is sustainable going forward. And for the future, we reaffirmed our commitment to continue to support Greece and its people in its reform efforts to stay the course of sustainable growth.
The country's creditors deemed it to have made significant progress since it was bailed out in 2010 and extended maturities and deferred interests of a major part of their loans, along with the big cash injection to ensure Athens can stand on its own feet.
I think it is the end of the Greek crisis. I think Greece is turning page. I think that it has all the building blocks there to leave the programme with confidence that we can access the markets, that we can implement our growth strategy and turn the agenda away from one of fiscal adjustment.
Since the bailouts began, Greece has been living primarily on borrowed money. After years of harsh austerity measures and economic strife, the country may soon be flourishing again. Luke Barber, Euronews.
With just 2 days to go to elections in Turkey, opinion polls are indicating a far closer contest than many had expected. President Tayyip Erdogan was on the campaign trail in the southeast of the country. He's seeking to extend his 16 years in power, but huge crowds have also been out in support for his closest challenger, Muharrem İnce, raising the possibility the vote could go to a second round. Well, to analyze Sunday's vote, I'm joined now by Euronews correspondent Sertaç Arkan. Sertaç, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
What is at stake in these elections?
Well, Turkey is at crossroads, and the stakes have never been higher. Well, the Turkish people are going to have 2 elections in one day under the ongoing nationwide state of emergency. So they're going to choose a president out of 6 candidates and decide a structure of the parliament out of 10 political parties. Now, what they're really going to decide on Sunday is a new governance system, infamously known as a Turkish-style presidential system, which is heavily criticized due to lack of checks and balances. Now, the Turkish people already said yes to this system back in 2017 with a referendum, with a very close margin, 51%. But all opposition vowed and openly stated that they're going to reverse these constitutional reforms if they come to power. So only if Erdogan, the current president, wins, this system is going to continue. Therefore, the society is very polarized and the polls are neck to neck. And it shows that the polls indicate that it might go to a second round. And critics believe that Erdogan will do everything in his power and beyond to get it done in the first round on Sunday.
All right, and we saw images there of supporters of the opposition, but let's talk about an actual opposition. Is there a real challenge to Erdogan in these elections? And some would ask, will it be a free and fair election?
Well, as I said, there are who believe that Erdogan will do everything in his power, and there are many criticisms from inside and outside. And when it comes to the opposition, Muharrem İnce, the candidate of the secularist and social democrat main opposition party, CHP, is leading the opposition right now close to 30 and over 30%. But the surprise element, the wild card, if you may, is Meral Akşener, the only woman candidate, which is a new nationalist, a liberal nationalist and a secular conservative, and her Good Party, the Good Party, can be a surprise element since she is the only one that many people should be facing in a possible second round Erdogan to get votes from Erdogan's base.
All right. Thank you for that analysis. Sertaç Arkan from our Turkish service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Political uncertainty in Iraq is set to continue after the country's Supreme Court confirmed that there must be a recount of last month's parliamentary vote. Allegations of fraud marred the poll, and earlier this month there were calls for a complete rerun after a fire at a warehouse containing half of Baghdad's ballot boxes. Nationalist cleric Muqtada al-Sadr and Iranian-backed militia chef Hadi al-Amiri were the surprise winners in the first count, but their attempts to form a government look set now to be delayed. And still to come on Good Morning Europe, after being caught in the middle of a political crisis in Europe, the Aquarius rescue ship is resuming its rescue operations, and we check in with the crew over in the Cube.
Could this be the most controversial jacket ever? Well, here in the Cube, we'll have that story. But first, let's take a short break.
You're watching Good Morning Europe. Our top story: days before an EU mini summit on immigration, another rescue ship is in hot water. After refusing it entry, Italy is now threatening to seize it and transfer over 200 migrants on board to Italian Coast Guard ships. Well, Melania Trump visited a shelter with migrant children separated from their parents, but it was a message written on her jacket that's threatening to overshadow that visit. Alex in the Cube has more on this story. Alex.
Tesa, it was an unannounced visit. The First Lady going to see firsthand the situation on the border, which had drawn international criticism over Trump's zero-tolerance policy. Perhaps some are saying Trump taking the hard line, Melania going down there herself to show a softer side to this presidential couple. However, it was the jacket that she wore boarding an aircraft on the way there that really grabbed people's attention. You can't necessarily see the text here, but let me pull it up in a bigger image. It says, "I really don't care, do you?" Now, this is a jacket from the retailer Zara. It's a fashion jacket, and the First Lady wore it to board an aircraft on her way to Texas. But it's this phrase, "I really don't care, do you?" people have been reading meaning into. Now, one thing it's worth saying, when Melania Trump reached Texas, when she went to the facility, we can see she was wearing smart attire. This jacket was nowhere near the children. It was on the way there, and when she was back in Washington, she was seen wearing it. So some people saw this as a statement of indifference, even though she didn't wear it around the children. Steve Wesley here saying he thought it was a joke or a fake to start with. Other people seized on that message of "I don't care" to say we really do care, including Parker Molly here, who set up ireallycare.com, where you can donate to a number of charities to help these migrant families split at the border under the zero-tolerance policy. Not one to be silent on issues, especially when it's criticism of the First Lady, Donald Trump tweeted. Now, Melania Trump's press secretary had said there was no meaning in this phrase, it was just a jacket. The president seemed to contradict that, saying, "I really don't care" refers to the First Lady's indifference to the fake news media. So whether there was a meaning in this jacket, was it a jibe at the media, was it just a bad choice? Either way, it has become the talk online. What do you think? You can let us know your thoughts using #TheCube.
All right, thank you, Alex. Now, the British government says new rules for EU citizens who want to continue living in the UK after Brexit will be, quote, simple and straightforward.
Our positioning will be, our default position will be to grant status, and so we'll be looking to grant status as quickly as we can.
And the webcast goes out live and a
This video explaining how applicants will have to register online to prove their identity, residency in the UK, and whether they have any criminal conviction. Each application will cost £65, about €75, and half that price for children. Well, a look at our top stories is coming up straight ahead, including the latest on that new migrant boat in the Mediterranean that Italy is threatening to impound. Plus, another controversy in Italy, this time over proposals of a census for the Roma community living there. Plus, more on the blueprint for Brexit we were talking about earlier there, what EU citizens have to do if they want to continue living in the UK. But first, let's have a look at our no-comment extraordinary images from Texas in the United States, where heavy rains are causing major flooding. You're watching Good Morning Europe. A recap of our top stories. Italy threat days before a migration summit. Another boat gets caught in the middle of a political storm. We're tracking this breaking story with Alex in the Cube, our social media news desk.
We have the latest, Tesa, as the co-founder of that charity says they've still heard nothing from Italian authorities.
And a draft plan for Brexit. What will European citizens living in the UK have to do if they want to stay? Well, some breaking news for you now. With 2 days remaining before an EU mini-summit on migration, Italy is once again at the heart of fresh drama in the Mediterranean this morning. Just weeks after blocking a rescue ship carrying more than 600 migrants, it's threatening to seize another boat, this time carrying over 200 people rescued from the water. This is the boat in question, captured in these images last week in Malta. It's called Lifeline. It is a Dutch-flagged rescue ship. Well, Italy is threatening to detain it and transfer 200 migrants to Italian Coast Guard ships. Italy's Interior Minister Matteo Salvini is taking on a hard line on the issue.
This ship is going to see Italy only by postcard, not because Matteo Salvini is ugly, bad and selfish, but because if there are rules, they have to respect them and not play with human lives.
Well, for the latest on reaction, what Italy is saying, Alex in the Cube is following this story. Alex.
Tessa, our team here in the Cube this morning, alongside myself, is Emmanuel, Rachel and Eric. This is our Cube team. We're following all developments across all platforms as this story unfolds. In fact, we have the latest communication with the co-founder, Axel Stier, of this non-government organisation called Mission Lifeline. It's a German operation running this ship, which is Dutch-flagged. And they have made a very clear statement about where they stand on this. They say the dispute on migration must not be carried out at the expense of people in maritime distress. Now, we have been speaking to Axel Stier, and the latest he told us just a few minutes ago on a message to Emmanuel is saying, still, nothing from the Italians. We have heard nothing from the Italian authorities. This, despite that strong clip we just heard there from Matteo Salvini, and indeed suggestions the ship could be impounded. But despite being at the centre of this political storm, last night rescue efforts were continuing. Mission Lifeline was helping this container ship here rescue migrants on vulnerable dinghies. So the rescue operations are still going on. But with over 200 people on their ship, Axel making very clear to us that they are a transport ship, not a permanent rescue ship. They need to help get these migrants to shore soon. So with that many people on board, I asked him, what are your next steps?
Well, the next step is we try to talk to other European countries to get help, because the people on board need immediately evacuation. It couldn't be that they are on the sea for more than 50 or 80 hours. It's many people get seasick, so it's a situation. It's not easy, but we need to stay calm and wait what happened.
Just one last thing. A message we're getting from Italy is that ships like yourself are encouraging people to make this dangerous crossing. So the Italians are perhaps saying that by taking a stern stance on your particular ship, they are dissuading more people from making this dangerous journey. The idea is you're breaking the rules. What do you think of that?
First of all, we rescued in international waters, and if you ever have been there, it's a huge area, and it's just a matter of luck to find a boat. So these accusations are completely nonsense.
So the latest situation, this is the ship, the latest situation, over 200 people on board. Axel very clearly saying to us, we are a rescue ship. We're not a permanent transport ship. We have rescued these people. We now need to find a European country who can take them in. However, they find themselves at a centre of a political storm, with Italy threatening to impound this ship. We'll have the latest for you minute by minute here in the Cube, Tessa.
Thank you, Alex, and the Cube team keeping track of that story. And as we mentioned, this comes just days before a summit in Brussels on the migrant crisis, and weeks after Italy blocked that rescue ship Aquarius. Political editor at Politico, Ryan Heath, has been following the latest on the upcoming talks, and he's joining us live now from Brussels. Ryan, this latest situation in Italy, will it have any impact on the upcoming summit?
Yes, it will play into Italy's hands. We've already seen over the last 24 hours that Giuseppe Conte has essentially said, I'm not coming to this summit if there's a pre-cooked outcome. So he wants to be driven by events like this. He wants to be able to show that Italy has been spending more political capital, spending more financial capital, spending more of its Coast Guard and defense resources on this issue than other countries. So he wants to be able to say that this is a very unfair situation. So it absolutely suits him to have this ship circling around without a solution while the summit goes on. And we've also heard from our sources our diplomatic sources, that files that we thought were very close to agreement, ones about how do you harmonize standards for protecting asylum seekers, where do you send the ones that have legitimate claims, how do you send back the ones that don't have legitimate claims. Those files are now back in the deep freezer, which makes this summit on Sunday either sound like a bit of a sham or a very unpredictable situation.
Yes, indeed, Ryan. In terms of potential agreements before the summit, that even that draft agreement on migration that was spearheaded by Germany, we're hearing that it has been dropped at the request of Italy. So where does that leave Angela Merkel then?
Angela Merkel is in a very precarious situation, and you can definitely see that by the fact that certain countries, be they Poland, Hungary, or others who have had a very tough line on migrants, they haven't been invited to this event on Sunday because that wouldn't help Angela Merkel. This summit, at the end of the day, is effectively a construction to help her keep her coalition government together. And the reason why she's under pressure is because her Bavarian partners, who have also been at the front line of this large number of refugees who had been coming over the past 3 years, they're using this for their electoral politics in October. They think Bavarians have had enough. They think Angela Merkel acted unilaterally and without thought, and so they're really using this for domestic political advantage. So the refugees really are a political pawn in this situation.
Indeed, a very big one at that. Thank you, Ryan Heath, political editor of Politico. Thanks. And just 5 days after it helped bring over 600 migrants to Spain, the charity-run Aquarius ship has once again set sail to resume its rescue operations. Euronews reporter Mark Armstrong has the story.
The charity-run ship Aquarius set sail from the Spanish port of Valencia on Wednesday to resume its role of searching and rescuing migrants in danger at sea. In spite of all the recent controversy, the crew are determined to carry on.
The mission of SOS Mediterranee is to continue being at sea. As long as there is a need with the Aquarius, we will be there.
The Aquarius brought migrants to Valencia after being refused permission to dock in Malta and Italy, reigniting arguments over how to deal with migration to Europe.
We leave the politics to take their responsibilities. We believe that these whole stories highlighted that politicians did not take their responsibilities and even breach the law, international maritime law.
Aid organisations are calling on European governments to put politics aside and reach a common agreement on migrants.
The British government says new rules for EU citizens who want to continue living in the UK after Brexit will be, quote, simple and straightforward.
Our positioning will be, our default position will be to grant status. And so we'll be looking to grant status as quickly as we can.
Unveiling the plan, the Home Office released this video explaining how applicants will have to register online to prove their identity, residency in the UK, and whether they have any criminal conviction. Each application will cost £65, about €75, and half that price for children. Well, what happens to the more than 3 million EU citizens who currently live in the UK has been one of the thorniest issues in the ongoing Brexit talks. And for more on this, I am joined by Belle Donati from Westminster. So, Belle, we saw that video. So how easy is it really?
Well, Tessa, let me show you how easy it is. According to the Home Office yesterday, all you need if you're an EU citizen living in the UK to apply for settled status is one of these to prove your identity and one of these or access to the internet, as well as a £65 or €75 application fee. Now, the idea from the Home Office is that you input all of your data with a couple of questions online, and the government departments do the rest of the work, cross-checking against your background that you fulfil the criteria. So, how's it being received? Well, the best person to answer that question is my guest, Julien Oez, who is a French national living in France. Julien, you're also a member of the EU 3 million group, which campaigns for EU citizens living in the UK's rights. 2 years after the referendum, do you feel now like you've got some answers to some of the questions you had?
So, finally, 728 days now after the referendum, we're starting to get some answers to our many questions on settled status, what Brexit means for EU citizens. And while I feel happy that we're getting some answers, I don't necessarily feel 100% reassured.
Obviously, the process is starting. It's going to happen over, we've heard thus far that it was going to potentially start at the end of this year. That may be pushed back. Are you confident that what we've seen in the statement of intent is actually going to come into fruition?
So I've learned over the past 2 years that you need to take everything the government brings forward with a large dose of salt. I mean, for example, originally we were supposed to launch sometime in August, then sometime in September, then sometime in October, December, and now early next year.
How's it been, just personally, living in the UK over the last 2 years, and now? Do you feel as though the situation in the UK is welcoming for people like you?
I'm not entirely sure it is. I mean, for example, for me, I've had my fair share of trouble with some abuse in the streets, some abuse in a previous role working in a pub in South London. And for people like me, we have to deal with the media, which can be quite aggressive towards us. For example, the Daily Mail treating us as migrants, not citizens.
Julien, thank you very much. Well, you heard there from one EU citizen living in the UK, and we'll bring you plenty more of the morning.
All right, thank you for that, Belle Donati and her guest, Julien there. Thanks. And still to come for you on Good Morning Europe, Italy's interior minister has prompted another outcry by saying he wants a census of the Roma community. That's after a short break. Welcome back to Good Morning Europe. Now, Angela Merkel has rounded up her visit to Jordan by pledging an almost 90 million euro loan to the country. The German chancellor made the announcement following a meeting with Jordan's King Abdullah in Amman. The money, in addition to almost 400 million euros promised in aid, is to help the country carry out economic reforms required by the International Monetary Fund. Merkel is on a two-day visit to Jordan and Lebanon, where refugee policy has been at the top of the agenda. Well, both countries are bearing a heavy burden from the ongoing war in neighboring Syria. And today, Angela Merkel is in the Lebanese capital of Beirut. And joining us live from Berlin is Jessica Saltz. Jessica, we're watching this visit very closely today. What is expected to come out of it?
Well, Tesa, Angela Merkel's trip to Jordan and Lebanon was supposed to concentrate on Germany building economic ties with these two countries, but it's been quite quickly overshadowed by the very pertinent issue of migration. It was this topic which Angela Merkel discussed in detail with Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri over dinner last night, and this topic is expected to dominate talks today in Beirut as Merkel and German business delegates sit down with their Lebanese counterparts and the Lebanese president, at which point Angela Merkel is expected to pledge more support also for Lebanon. Angela Merkel spoke of her great respect for Lebanon and Jordan for taking in more refugees than any other countries per capita. And we saw Angela Merkel pledge a sizable loan and also a sizable amount of bilateral aid to Jordan yesterday. And this money not only to help the country get back on its feet economically, but also to help it take care of the refugees, house refugees there, send refugee children to school, Angela Merkel spoke of yesterday. So this is really being seen as a measure of Angela Merkel trying to boost the capabilities of countries surrounding Syria to be able to take in more refugees and look after them. And of course comes at a point when Merkel is under an immense amount of pressure to stop the flow of migrants coming into the European Union. And this is of course what will be discussed at a mini summit to be held in Brussels on Sunday.
All right, thank you for that, Jessica Salter, correspondent, keeping an eye on Merkel's trip and visits. Italy's right-wing populist Interior Minister Matteo Salvini has prompted a new outcry by saying he wants a census of the Roma community that would lead to non-Italians being deported. Well, after a chorus of criticism, he said his only aim was to protect Roma children. There are at least 130,000 Roma in Italy, and many live in unlicensed camps on the city's outskirts. The new policy is one of the first acts of Mr. Salvini's Interior Ministry. And for some reaction to this, we're joined by Jonathan Lee from the European Roma Rights Center, and he's joining us from Moscow. Jonathan, what has been the reaction from the Roma community on this?
Good morning. Both inside and outside of Italy, we've had civil society, Roma activists, Jewish activists, European institutions broadly condemning Salvini's comments and his proposed register as clearly racist. As many voices calling also reminiscent of the narrative of Europe around 80 years ago, which preluded the horrors of the Holocaust. What we have is Salvini here is using an age-old trick of utilizing widespread anti-Gypsyism into society to translate to political capital.
Well, to bring in what he said that he was protecting Roma children. Just briefly, how do you respond to that?
If the Italian government wants to protect Roma children, they can start by adopting measures which are in line with their national integration strategy, which they're assigned to. At the moment, the policy seems to be where Roma need to be placed in social housing. They are put in ethnically segregated camps, often run by the authorities, where numerous organizations have already cited conditions are often terrible. This has an effect on school, on education, on access to healthcare, water. If their priority is helping Roma children, then this is where they should be looking.
All right, thank you for that. Jonathan Lee from the European Roma Rights Center. Thanks. And we will have a lot more for you on Good Morning Europe. But do stay with us after a short break. You're watching Good Morning Europe. Welcome back to the program. Now, France's streets were filled with music as the yearly Fete de la Musique took place across the country last night. Well, I was lucky to be out on the streets of Lyon to take in some of the fun.
From orchestras to DJs, country singers, and everything in between. It's that one day every year when all of France becomes one big street party. For the 37th year, French cities come alive with free performances, thousands of them across the country.
What you'll find at the Fete de la Musique is diversity. Diversity in musical styles and the kind of people that come out to watch. I am here in the center of Lyon and it can't get any more diverse than this. I found myself a concert of the kind of music you don't often hear in France. This right here is French country folk music and the people who are listening and watching are simply soaking it all in. A little earlier, I got to speak to the artist herself.
The meaning of Fete de la Musique is the share of those, the share of our music, of our hearts.
And that gives people a taste of music they might not have expected to enjoy.
I listen to rap music. I don't listen to classical music. So that's why I'm here.
It's amazing actually because we can dance together, we can sing together, and it's allowed to bring your own instrument.
A day and night of music and fun, it's a tradition that people just can't get enough of.
A lot of great concerts there. And thank you for joining us today on Good Morning Europe. Do stay with Euronews. We have a lot more for you throughout the day. And we'll leave you with today's No Comment and more pictures from the Fête de la Musique in Paris this time, where Emmanuel Macron attended the celebrations.
Like years away. Like years